think having members of the public really impacted on that. I thought it was positively, because I found it really interesting to see members of the public giving up their time to come to a lecture, which, you know, usually it's like, oh, I've got a lecture, you know, I'm gonna get on, got my lecture, I'm gonna go in, you know. And so like that kind of seeing these people wanting to come and learn, because perhaps some of them hadn't gone to a lecture in a long time or hadn't heard about kind of new ideas and theories in so long, kind of made me feel a new sort of sense of appreciation for how lucky I've been to sort of have great teachers teaching me about really, really interesting things which most people don't have an exposure to, and I think a lot of people later in life wish that they had. And so I thought that was one component of it, and the second component was a lot of the members of the public said really, really interesting things, and they knew so much, and they had really like excellent kind of input, and I thought that was enriching also, because then Yota would bounce off that and kind of maybe take a different direction or leave it be if it wasn't particularly relevant.
Not being a student, you appreciate it so much more. You appreciate this learning thing is so enriching, like it's really gives you sort of traction.
I started to realise how lucky I'd been, and that I'd been taking a lot of these things for granted, and maybe talked myself into that student mindset of, oh, you know, got to get myself out of bed to go to this lecture, I have to go to the library, I have to do this. But I started to realise, I don't know if it was because of this module, actually it might have been, that I don't ever miss lectures, and I go to the library of my own accord. I could just not read, or I could just not kind of go to the library as much as I do. But I do, and why is that? Because there's this module where I came down here and it was very nice, it was a very nice experience. I'd get up and put nice clothes on and listen to music on my way down, have a nice breakfast, maybe if I was early I'd have a coffee, you know, that feels like a very recreational experience. I don't know, there was a real freedom to this module which I haven't experienced before, a freedom to kind of discover your own material without being penalised. This was a challenge to how I see university learning. It wasn't like anything we'd done, but it felt like it was how it should be.
Work that we've done, particularly I would say maybe the last couple of lectures, and most particularly the last lecture, which was that kind of conversation between Plotinus and Bruce Now. That was actually fascinating to me intellectually, but also very relevant to my work and to helping me kind of define my work, if you like.
I found it interesting what it did to my brain. It just started moving, like he said, it's pushing it beyond what it does normally.
Yeah. So
in that sense, I quite liked it. And my husband said this morning, well, it's just a hobby, and I felt quite offended. I thought, you know what, of course I could be working right now, but this, I don't really see it as a hobby. It's a type of education that I choose to go to, rather than just sitting in my own work soup and thinking, I'm done, you know, I don't have to progress any further.
Is that some of them felt that you knew much more. So members of the public who already did they knew much more, and so how could we? But in fact, it had a very positive effect, as we found out last week. And the effect was that they realized what it means, like what you were saying, that for someone to be here, not because they have to, but because they want to learn. And they thought that, wow, what if we also thought of the 3 years that we play so
Although you mightn't have said you need to trust me and I'll be worthy of your trust at the beginning, you said a number of similar things. You know, this is something new that we're trying, and you know, I want you to go with me on this one. You know, things like that. But I found that exciting. You know, to be a part of, you know, something new. Yeah, I mean, it was a bit. There were times when I was a little bit like, oh, you know, I didn't quite grasp that concept, or, you know, and I think maybe when you feel a bit, you know, like perhaps you didn't understand something and you're not on campus and you're not where you're, you know, you are out of your comfort zone in that way. But yeah, no, I thought it was, I think you incorporated us into feeling like we were doing something new. All of us felt that way, and we were aware that it was a new kind of project.
Anxiety can work both ways.
Yeah.
So long as it's within certain, of course, limits.
Yeah.
But you did have all the safety nets there, you know,
Yeah.
the seminars afterwards, the PowerPoints, you know, this and that and the other. But as far as the happening was concerned, people were...
It was frightening.
It was a bit frightening, and it was for me as well.
Sounds very complicated. So it's always, I've always thought it's a little bit, there's quite a lot to take in, and yes, it is kind of everything just all broken up into pieces and then put together again in a different way. My concept, I just found it really interesting just to hear philosophers' views on art, although not necessarily I agreed.
So intellectualism is sometimes a dirty word in this country. And it's actually, if it's not, it's good. It's good for things to be hard to understand.
I found it interesting what it did to my brain. It just started moving, like he said, it's pushing it above and beyond what it does normally.
Yeah.
Well, we had the texts, and I was, I mean, your point about reading things at owners. My experience of reading these things is you get onto paragraph 4 and you say, this is just completely barking mad. I must be misreading it, and you read it again and you say, no, it still feels like it's crazy. And you just need to have a conversation with somebody. Either there are 20 other people who say, yeah, a lot of people have said that, or they say, no, you're reading the sentence the wrong way around, it means the opposite.
We became a group, I should tell, because even we didn't know their name. It's when we see them, we start to say hello, how are you? Even this is something, isn't it?
We came to sort of like recognise people, the volunteers at the Blue Coat, people who you'd seen at the lectures, you know, you'd recognise people. And while you're walking down, you might be walking all the way down Hardman Street and Bold Street next to someone that you know is going where you're going, and you sort of smile and, you know, be like, hi, you know.
I mean, I think in some ways it was a stroke of luck that I think it hardly worked because of the mixture of students and the public. For me, I've seen talks in the past that have been really poorly attended. And in some ways, it seems to be work as a dynamic because the students had to be there. It created a kind of momentum.
Yeah, it was a strange group of people, but it was really nice to sort of see different faces and familiarise yourself with different people.
Some parts of philosophy, but also, you know, of other academic, say, subjects. Are more appropriate to be linked with what you would say the real world, or the everyday world, rather.
The really interesting thing about philosophy is that it's a practice.